Hello, Denise. How are you doing? It's been a while since we've seen each other on
Yeah.
screen.
Hi, Kat. Yeah, I'm doing fine, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm doing good. I'm glad to have you back to talk about all the things that you've been up to in the last year. But before we go on, will you introduce yourself for anyone who is new to the
Yeah,
podcast?
sure. So I'm Professor Denise Baden, Professor of Sustainability at the University of Southampton in the United Kingdom. And I guess I'm here because I chose fiction as a way to try and get some of my ideas out there to sort of move beyond preaching to the converted, find new audiences, and also it's so much more fun than writing journal articles.
Is it?
It is.
Yeah, the last time you were here, we talked a lot about
Mm,
how you moved from like in your professorship, you have students who
yeah,
are interested in climate change and all those, and so they are kind of already your converted.
that's
Um,
right.
so you wrote Habitat Man, which is a romantic comedy, is it?
Yeah, it's a rom-com. Yeah, and is actually based on a real-life green garden consultant who gave up his job in London to help people make their gardens wildlife friendly.
Nice.
And I just thought, what a great idea for a plot. So I threw in a love interest and a body buried in the garden, and
As you do.
as you do. And yeah, he's been trying to live it down ever since.
I did not find a body.
That's
Well,
right.
you never know. All of the British mysteries, there's always a body somewhere weird.
There has to be a body in the garden, yeah. Actually, what was really interesting about that in terms of, trying to, in a way, affect people's behavior, but
Hmm.
without being preachy or boring and doing it in a fun way.
Right.
A lot of people wrote to me and they said, the natural burial scene was so moving. I've now changed my will. I'm going to have a natural burial.
Oh, wow.
And there's also a scene where I decided if my hero is going to have a great epiphany, a revelation moment, he had it in a composting toilet, and that was that was another one that people really liked. It's like, you make composting toilets sound really cool.
There you go. That's
You never
awesome.
know what's going to stick.
This is very true. So, the things that were in your book, just for anyone who hasn't
Mhm.
listened to the last episode, which I'll have a link in the show notes, but they were all real things. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't science fiction, it was stuff that you can actually change.
that's right. Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
that's wonderful. So, you not only write fiction, so you have Habitat Man as a full manuscript,
Yeah.
but you've been running this contest for a while. Um, so has it kept the same name or has it not kept the same name? How is
Are
that?
the green stories writing
The
competitions?
Green Stories writing competitions. So that's
Yes,
the
I
overall.
Yeah, so I set these up in about 2018 because I realized there's a real gap in the
Mm,
market because there was a lot of cli-fi out there, but it's really dystopian. And
yes.
it's like, unless we do something, terrible things are going to happen. This is what it will look like. And I didn't really like it. I mean, much as I
Okay.
care about the environment, I kind of read for pleasure and to be uplifted. And I did a bit of research on it as well. And I found that, some people are really engaged by fear and dystopia, but a lot of people just switch off and
Yeah.
they go into denial or avoidance, perfectly rational responses, really.
Right. Well,
And
if the earth
I,
is gonna burn, why why do anything? What could I
and
do? Yeah, it would be almost like
yeah, it just leaves
overwhelming
you
to
feeling
think.
so helpless, doesn't it? And
Right.
it's as I thought, well, I think if we're going to be creating this eco anxiety, let's try and harness some solutions in here. And
Yeah,
and pretty well every film as well is set in the future is dystopian. I thought,
that's very true.
yeah,
It's
we need
true.
a vision. We need to know what a sustainable society might look like if it's done well, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's like all the films are like, you guys already screwed this up, and now the
Yeah.
few of us still surviving are,
I thought,
screwed.
there's plenty of competitions out there, but there didn't seem to be any that were asking for green solutions to be put in
Okay,
the manuscript.
right.
So, so I set up the Green Stories writing competitions where I kind of challenge writers. I put all kinds of solutions on the website. I said, try and, almost like product placement,
Yeah,
planet placement, if you like. Try and bung these in. And I got loads of entries, not many of which
interesting.
fit the criteria.
Oh.
Sure, with a free competition, I guess, but lots of them were like they raised awareness, perhaps, but they
Mm,
didn't tie it to any solution other than
okay.
chucking in your job to go and fight rainforest destroyers. Like everyone's going to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas my body in the garden, which doesn't use a mahogany coffin, but a nice
Yes.
locally grown willow coffin, in a way that is a solution
Okay.
that people can engage in. So
Right.
that's one of the reasons I started writing myself, because I thought, maybe I need some examples of what I mean. Um, so that's really helped actually, to get people to understand the difference between just raising awareness and
Right.
actually showing people what a solution might look like.
Yeah, because I think most of us have the awareness. I think what you're right in that most of us don't have the solution other than, turn off your lights and, you know,
Yeah.
um, save
And
your
if you're
water. And I don't know, I'm trying to
you're
think of.
not aware as well, it's because you're choosing not to be. I think by
Yeah, for
now
sure.
it's
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I'm sure we all know one or two of those people, right? But
Yeah.
it's not that they're not aware, they're just literally ignoring. Um,
I do understand that. So with Habitat Man, I skip all the alarming statistics on
mm,
biodiversity loss and go straight to, well, mostly the love interest and the fun, but I bung in a few solutions there.
sure.
But the one coming up, I think that your listeners will be interested in, will be the Orna Ross Green Stories Novel Prize. So some people will know the name Orna Ross from the Alliance of Independent Authors. She's been a real champion for self-publishing. So she sponsored this prize now for a couple of years running. And we're looking for a full-length novel. And in the first instance, we asked for 3 chapters. And it's
Okay.
open to anybody, as long as it's unpublished
Hmm.
and is in English, basically.
Okay.
And ideally, we'll probably, sometimes we come back if we can't decide between the finalists to ask for some more chapters.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be a completely polished, finished product, but maybe pretty far into your first draft, I think, before you might be ready to send anything in.
Right.
And check out the website. It's greenstories.org.uk, and it'll give all the details there
Okay.
to check the criteria, because we rely, because it's a free competition, on volunteer judges, and we don't want to waste their time with lots of entries that don't meet the criteria. So do check the website first. But it's particularly good for, we all mentor people towards publication, having had some experience ourselves. And we just published our first winner. I set up
Ooh.
this imprint Habitat Press to support the Green Stories project, and we just published Visco, which is our winner from 2020. So
Oh, we'll
we
have to check
hope
that.
that of the entrants we'll have something worthy of publication
Yeah.
further down the line.
Oh, but these are full-length novels that offer
Yeah.
some sort of solution or like
For example,
yours where
yeah.
go ahead.
I'm just going to say, so last year's was called Unfrozen. It was a lovely story about a guy waking up 40 years into the future, and he suddenly realizes, hang on a minute, why was I cryogenically frozen? So it's a mystery. And his children are now older than him, and he's
Oh, that'd
40
be
years in the
weird.
future. So you got this great hook straight away,
Yeah.
but also it's a lovely opportunity to see what society looks like now. So in
Okay.
some ways we've really addressed a lot of the issues, but in other ways there's other issues that are now worrying us. So
Okay.
you've got this lovely backdrop of a society. You can kind of plug in what it might look like if we did a bit right.
Oh, what
Plus
a
a
lovely
really
idea.
engaging hook. Now I can't wait to publish this, but he's still working on it. He's about halfway through it now, and I'm encouraging him,
Yeah.
get it finished. I'd love to have it ready for next year's competition so people can read it and get an idea
Yeah.
of, what a novel like that looks like.
Okay. So when you apply for this, the
Mhm.
greenstories.org.uk is the link, right? So we'll
Yeah.
have that link in the show notes. And the deadline's January 3rd to get those first three
Uh-huh.
chapters in.
Yeah.
But then you mentor them, you help them, especially if it's a first time writer, to get it published underneath Green Story, the Habitat
Well, we
Press,
can do it
or
a number of ways. So,
okay.
for example, with David Feld, who wrote Visco, we had a free manuscript appraisal, and then basically encouragement, get it done, and when it's done,
Hmm.
send it over. And if we can publish it ourselves and make it easier for you, or feel free to find a publisher or do it yourself. It's just kind of a little bit of hand holding, really,
Sure,
and a bit of
sure.
advice. So that's the sort of the more informal element. It's kind of created a little community of writers who are all trying to change the world through
Yeah.
great stories.
Yeah, but that's very nice because
Yeah.
you get sort of a different pair of eyes on it of people who might be
Yeah.
a few steps ahead of you, and that's always nice in this field
Yes.
of getting that
It
encouragement
certainly is.
and that hand holding.
Mm.
Sometimes Sometimes I need my hand out. So they're gonna find all of the details on
Yeah,
the website, but basically it has to be, well, you kind of prefer that at least the idea is fleshed out and
yeah,
they know that there's some sort of solution or some sort of
yeah,
encouraging, uplifting,
yeah,
I guess, story to that
yeah.
ties in with climate change. And
So we asked for the first chapter,
okay.
a chapter that best illustrates how they meet the criteria, and another chapter, in the end chapter if you have
Right.
it,
Okay, okay, okay.
but another one of your choice. And it doesn't even have to have an explicitly green theme. It can just be, more subtly promoting green solutions while
Right.
actually maybe being a thriller or a romance or whatever. So,
Sure.
for example, Unfrozen doesn't have a specifically green theme. It's just a lovely opportunity to feed in what that society looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. What it might look like if we
Yeah.
moved away from fossil fuels or something, like what that
Mhm.
imagination would be. Okay. That's super interesting. And this has been going on. You've done short stories before, right? But you've
Yeah.
done definitely like full novels as well.
We've done novels, we've done radios, scripts, we've done
Wow.
screenplays. I'm not, they haven't been produced. I mean, my hope was, we'll get these in, we'll send them off, and, production companies will pick them up and say, yeah, we'll make that. But it's a very competitive industry. We
Yes.
do send the winners off, say, for example, in the UK to the BBC, um, but we haven't yet had any bites on that.
That's interesting.
But that's still something to aspire to.
Maybe the fear still sells too well in the news media,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Well, maybe they'll figure out how much, because really
Mm.
the idea for you is, as you started out with Habitat Man, was
Yeah.
to find solutions and encourage people and to make a difference really with your writing, even if
Yes.
it's sort of a handful of people at a time or a couple hundred, couple
Yeah.
thousand that read your book. And I mean, we would all, it would be lovely if radio and television would get into that as well, but that has sort of moved forward. And have you, since we've talked, have you seen, I mean, I guess that you've seen an encouraging result on that sort of making a difference and
Yeah.
using your writing in that way.
Definitely. So I was at a event. I was speaking actually at an event at the Responsible Media Forum last month with Netflix sustainability manager
Nice.
there and the BBC sustainability content manager, and they were talking about how they're trying to integrate green themes into their stories. And I was at an event last week where they are looking for scripts now with a green theme. Actually, to be honest, and I'm delighted by this, they've almost entirely adopted the green stories criteria.
Okay.
um, so that's great, and I
Like
am
they were
pitching.
sneaking on your website.
I'm pitching some ideas myself, Kat.
Good.
I am pitching some ideas myself. I'm pitching the idea. I can't decide which ones to do, so I'm only allowed to pitch two. I've
Okay.
got three.
Might have to pick
So
a straw.
one is Habitat Man, which would make a perfect TV series,
Right.
actually.
Like one of
Um,
those mini TV series. I love those.
Yeah, sort of quite lyrical, quite nature based, visits a different garden each week kind of thing. Another one is the idea of a Christmas movie called Green Santa, where toys are made in a toy hospital rather than a toy factory to
Nice.
promote the idea of reuse over, buy and throw away.
Yes.
And another is The Assassin, which is based on a story I wrote for the anthology I'm going to talk about in a minute, where you've got 8 people in a citizen's jury discussing climate change solutions, one of which is an assassin.
Oh my word. That's so
Yeah, yeah.
cool.
So that actually would also, I can visualize as making quite a good
Hmm.
series there. So yeah, I have to
Everybody
decide which
tweet
one to go
Denise
for.
and tell her what she should pitch.
Yeah, so we've got a whodunit, a Christmas movie, and a sort of rom-com. So they couldn't be more different in genre.
It's so true. I guess
Yeah,
it kind of depends on how quickly they could get it through. I guess, the evergreen ones would, they'd have to get Christmas out by next year, which I
yeah,
don't know. Maybe they could but that's wonderful that Netflix and the BBC, I mean, those are television,
yeah,
giants basically
No,
that
they're
could.
really into it, and they don't want, preachy
Right.
dystopian ones. They want exactly what I've been talking about, something that people can engage in and inspire them and talk more about the solutions than the problems.
Right, right, to sort of
Yeah.
live out the example
Yeah.
um on the screen, right? And if we fall in love with those characters, we always want to
Yeah.
be and act like those characters.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I can
That's
see
right.
that. That's wonderful that television is changing in all sorts of ways. Where we're representing more people, we're representing different lives, and yeah, represent the changes that we can make.
One of the
Um,
things I'm quite interested in is the effect of role models, because I did a bit of research into it as well, and I'm doing some research now. Hashtag climate characters.
oh,
We're going to start it properly soon, but I've got a bit on the Green Stories website. We'll be quite interested in how fictional characters affect our own aspirations. So for all those Sex in the City, or And Just Like That was the sequel, wasn't it? Or Emily in Paris fans,
yeah,
where the main character has got a different outfit each day as a walk-in wardrobe, the size of a museum,
yeah,
where all your heroes have fast cars and private jets. Is that still okay
yeah,
to be promoting this kind of really high carbon lifestyle as an aspiration when we know now, if we choose to think about it, the environmental consequences of that? So I kind of just want to start the conversation, because when I look now, for example, just back 10 years of films, I think, oh my God, that's so sexist. Oh,
yes,
that's so racist. I'm wondering if in 10 years' time we'll go back and think, oh, that's so consumerist.
yeah,
Who
yeah.
knows? Who knows where we'll end up? But I think it is probably worth thinking about how we are affected, by what, the fictional characters.
That is true. And I mean, it would be so easy to have a couple episodes about the impact of the textile industries.
Yeah.
I mean, I came back from Nepal last year. I think I went after I spoke to you,
Hmm.
and very much, I'd always been aware of textile issues, but very much changed a lot of our habits and
Yeah.
decided. And I think, it's the easy, no, it's not the easy, it's the cheap, like things are cheaper,
Yeah.
because they're made in certain places, but the conditions of the workers are much, much worse. People used to buy a
Yeah.
lot more local because that's what it was, the seamstress. And of course, people lost those jobs and they all moved overseas. But deciding it's not just like not having as much, it's I might have fewer items, but they were made
Yeah.
at least by somebody who is paid properly and given proper
Yeah.
working conditions,
And
and
so
kind of
there's
all
that
the way
social
through.
aspect too. You're right.
Right, right.
But you don't even need it. Like, for example, Emily in Paris, I must confess to loving that series.
Well, it is
But
visually beautiful
it
too.
is, and there's the sexy French chef and Paris, and of course you like it. But a lot of it is about her being really inventive with marketing techniques. But there's
Hmm.
so much going on now with fashion swaps and pre-loved apps and
Yeah,
things like that. It doesn't have to be that trope of women shopping with, these sort of bags bouncing against their thighs kind of thing.
yeah,
It could be women swapping, so
absolutely.
you don't need it. It's not a necessary part of the story. You could just as easily be promoting those sort of like pre-loved clothes and that kind
Yeah,
of thing,
yeah, and
because they're
quite.
really taking off now, aren't they?
Yes, I mean, a friend of mine actually, her husband used to work the Paris runway as a hair
Mm.
as a hair designer, I guess is what they
Uh-huh.
would call it, the hairstylist, and she would rent clothes
Yeah,
while she was over there because she
makes
didn't want
sense.
to deal
Yeah,
with the suitcase, and you have to wear a certain,
yeah,
style when you're the assistant. She's like, I just rent it and it's fun. And you get these clothes that are sort of like
yeah.
new, you feel beautiful, and then you leave them and they
And
wash
you
them
don't
and
have all like, you can't find anything 'cause your wardrobe's so stuffed.
no kidding.
Especially as space becomes ever more
There's no way Emily in
problematic.
Paris has that space.
She's got a tiny little flat. Where'd it all go?
Paris. It's Paris.
Yeah,
And what's funny is like if you go over to France, the French women are very much about the accessories more than anything. So
yeah,
it's not even true to life,
no.
It's so funny. Anyway. But you're right, we idolize these certain
Mm,
things.
yeah,
Which is interesting because then we have things like I think it was a Kardashian or something jetted off for like a 5-minute trip or something and
yeah,
just got, ripped on social media because people are like, you have the ability to influence certain things,
Yeah,
whereas the rest of us normal people are like, well, I'm trying my best, but I don't
I
have a
know.
private jet.
Yeah, we're getting called out for it now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We're like, especially if you put it out there, and rightly so, like you should be called out
Yeah,
for flying 5 minutes. But then, interestingly enough, the shows that we want to watch are those. Well, I'm going to
yeah.
jet you off to Chicago. It's 5 minutes away.
I know. You see, I can't enjoy those anymore because I'm too immersed in the subject. It's like, if you worked in an abattoir, you wouldn't want to watch someone eating beef, kind of thing. But yeah, yeah, and I think more and more people are beginning to sort of feel a little bit uneasy. We'll
Yeah.
see how it goes. We'll see how it
Yeah, we
goes.
will. But
Yeah,
part of that is the influence of pitching Netflix. And then you are, I mean, you're finding a lot of writers who are into this as well, where that part of
yeah.
their conscious is creating solutions or integrating it. And I know most writers do have sort of a life theme that they're
Hmm.
passionate about that
Yeah,
ends up in their writing, because that's part of them, right? And so you are finding quite a few authors who this is their
yeah.
passion, right? Because you just published an anthology. So,
I have, yes. It's called No More Fairy Tales: Stories to Save Our Planet, and it's Steve, this chemical engineer who'd entered one of my green stories competitions way back. He said, "I've got all these ideas, and like no one's listening. Why don't we do an anthology in time for COP27?" And I looked at it. It's like we have about 220 days between now and then. It's impossible. And he says, so's the climate crisis. But have you given up on that?
well,
It's
there you
like,
go.
oh, okay, I'm in. So we
As if
put a
you're
call.
not busy enough, Denise. You're just gonna throw
I'm
an
so glad
anthology.
I did it though. I mean, it almost
Good.
driven me to a nervous breakdown trying to get it done in time. But what was lovely was working with these authors. So we put a call out to some of the Green Stories winners and some more experienced authors like Kim
Hmm.
Stanley Robinson and Paolo Bacigalupi, who write these great kind of climate fiction. And and we got stories flooding in, and we kind of work with the writers together with the climate experts, and it's kind of an iterative process. So sometimes you have beautifully written stories, but there wasn't much there of a solution.
Mm.
And we decided we wanted big solutions that would really
Okay.
make a difference, not tiny little tinkering around the edges. So
Okay.
then we'd have to say to you, can you just boost this bit up a bit?
Right.
Or other ones, we'd have one where there's just like all climate solution, there's no plot.
Yes.
you know. Um, and so we got on board. Actually, it's quite a lovely story. As a sort of freelance comedy writer, and his wife was a real greenie, and she died earlier this year. And
Oh.
I only found out quite recently that's what got him into it. He met this guy Steve at her funeral, and in testament to her, he basically devoted himself to the cause of
Oh.
taking stories from people who know a lot about climate, but perhaps aren't such great story writers, and turning them into really good plots and characters.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
and one of them is based on his own experience. It wasn't until later that I realized the character there, who'd been motivated by love for his dead wife, was actually him.
Oh,
And
wow.
it brought a tear to my eye. And it's like every author has their own story of why they want to do this,
Yeah.
because I thought, how come you've all turned this around so quickly? And we didn't know at the time if we'd even have funds, and but a
Right.
lot of them, they write as therapy. Because if you sort of work in the area of climate change and you've got this strong idea of what would make a difference, and no one's listening,
Yeah.
you kind of you write it. You think, well, if I write it, maybe it will happen. And
Yeah.
we've already had that. We had a couple of stories that had this lovely idea of giving nation status to the ocean, because we all think about planting trees, but land is only a fraction of our planet. Most of it's
Right.
sea. You can get way more benefit from planting seagrass and kelp. And also, people can do what they want to the ocean. They can trawl the bottom, they can destroy it, destroy coral, acidify it, and there's no cost to them.
Oh.
So the idea is, what if you give the ocean nation status, give it legal rights, and then charge for anybody to access its services? And those monies can be put into projects to plant seagrass and kelp, and all these things that will absorb carbon. Um, and it's a really well thought out idea. And we kind of, one story pitches the idea and another one goes back to it and sees what it looks like decades down the line when it's come
Yeah.
to happen. And the author who was behind that was at the World Ocean Summit last week and was speaking to key people there who loved the idea and said, let's do a session on this at the next Ocean Summit in Lisbon. And I'm
Wonderful.
talking to, on Wednesday, actually, to our head of law. And he loves the idea. He says giving rights to nature is one of the most impactful things we can do, perhaps, to start, preserving
Yeah.
our lovely world. He's very interested in this. So we're thinking, can we actually find a way to make the story we wrote a reality? And it's beginning to look like, you know, all the steps are laid out in the story. Maybe we just need to follow them in real life. And it's a safe space as well. Like in a story, you can play out what something might look like.
Right.
It's like science fiction. You imagine a technology or AI taking over it, and you play out what might this look like.
Right.
Some are dystopian, some are utopian, mostly dystopian, but it's a safe space. And it's the same thing with social changes. Like, what if instead of currency, you had a kind of carbon credit card where, high carbon purchases were rationed? What might that look like?
Hmm.
No politician could talk about it.
No.
It would be far too dangerous. But oh my word, would it make the difference in terms of climate? All the innovation would go towards sustainable innovation. We'd have sustainable aviation fuel in a minute if
Yeah.
no one could afford to fly. Whereas
That's
at the
very true.
moment, it's begging for investment. And I want them to succeed. I want to go traveling without guilt, without flight
Yeah.
shame.
Of
Um,
course.
but you can float these ideas in a story, and you can play out the winners, the losers, how it might work, and start raising awareness of something that in one day might become necessary, but people don't understand it.
Yeah.
Or again, with citizens' juries, it's quite hard to make long term decisions in a democracy where you've got the electoral cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you have citizen assemblies where they've been shown to really lead to much better decision making, actually, and much more sustainable decision making, and the only barrier to them becoming really taking off is public awareness.
Okay.
So the story, The Assassin, that I wrote, that I'm now developing into a play and also a screenplay, is a really lovely way to raise that awareness.
Right.
We're really excited about it. And I think a lot, like I said, a lot of the authors, they write as therapy, hoping that by writing it, they can help make it happen. But the art, I think we were saying earlier how hard it is to write something you care passionately about without over over egging it and making it really preachy and awful. And so every single story went through professional literary consultants
Right.
and came
Right.
back. And to be honest, if they didn't meet the I don't want to put this down test.
Yes.
It didn't make it in. Each story had to deliver on the story as well.
Right. Because you want people to follow through and finish
Yeah,
the story.
people are
But
reading for pleasure. They've chosen
yes.
a fiction book. Yeah, they want to learn something, but mostly they want to be entertained. So we've got
Yeah.
romances, we've got
Yeah.
family dramas. We've got all kinds of genres in there.
Right. I mean, that's why stories started, right? To
Yeah,
teach the community, but wrapped up in a
yeah,
story. So, that's why kids love a story. They don't know that they're learning. It's not sitting down and doing math, but I also can see how, as you're writing a solution in
mm,
fiction form, you can almost not like the defensiveness might fall away, where you can
yeah,
feel like you can open it up to discussion, where
yeah,
people are excited about it instead of the situation we have these days where it seems like every time there's a debate, people are just like digging their own hole further and further. It's not a conversation. It's I'm defending this and you're defending that. And even if
yeah,
you might convince me, I'm, and the audience goes because they're, for
yeah,
one person or the other. And it's just, it's tiring to watch. Whereas I feel like with fiction, you go, well, that's interesting. Kind
yeah,
of maybe it takes down those wall barriers, even as the person who wrote it, like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, what if this would happen? Well, that just seems a lot more productive.
I'm not saying there wasn't any debate though, because
Sure,
we offered
sure.
each story out to a group of people, and oh my word, the differences. So everyone wanted the same thing, basically avert the climate crisis, have a nice future to look forward to.
Right.
But the engineers love a big audacious solution, and the more unlikely and impossible and difficult, the better.
Okay.
So they don't want it easy, no, because then they can't demonstrate their skill. So they're like, glaciers are freezing. Well, let's just refreeze them. Like you do with snow slopes, pump snow at them. We can do that. There's too much sun. Let's put a big solar shade, block it out. And like the social sciences are saying, are you crazy? If that got into the wrong hands, it would be a weapon.
Yeah, I'm
And the
thinking of all the
engineers don't care
problems.
about that. But we could make it work. And then the ecologists, are thinking, the ocean's too acid, let's put in some alkali. And the ecologists are thinking, but what about, the ecology and the ecosystem? Just leave nature alone and everything will be all right. And so they all got very different approaches, your nature-based ones, your techies, your social scientists, hugely different approaches. Because the
Okay.
social scientists are thinking, well, what's the point pouring all this money into projects that suck the carbon out the air if we're still pumping it back in with our society that basically encourages everyone to consume as much as possible?
Right.
you know it's like having the hot tap on with the plug out. So
Yeah.
they look, and I think our anthology, it delivers something for everybody. Every point of view is covered.
Yeah.
So I think there's plenty there if you're a techie to enjoy. There's plenty there if you're more into the social aspect. There's plenty there for your nature lovers. And sometimes it's played out in the plot. Like we've got one romance where there's a sort of very kind of feminist ecologist who's all about nature, and men come along with their big machines trying to make everything better. They just make it worse. And this guy who's very much into tech will solve it. So you've got
Okay.
proper trees versus artificial trees, and they play it out in a bit of a sort of an edgy romance.
Oh, that's wonderful. But I mean,
Yeah,
too, playing out just the dialogue between the different sciences. I mean, that's an interesting story
yeah,
plot as well of like, hey, these are all the things, but that's what we do with story. We play them out and we see if we can get a step further, than
yeah,
having to actually do it in real life of like, if we could get all of the social sciences and the ecologists and everyone sort of on the same page of this thing, how
yeah,
could it then go forward? Like, so I can see so much benefit to all of this um as you keep going. Like, you're only 4 years into this, really, of
yeah.
you've had 4 years of contests, and now you have, this is the first anthology,
It's the second
the second
anthology.
anthology.
So, but I'm really, really proud of it because we were much more. This has to be, not just a green theme, but a proper climate solution. And I
That's
honestly
wonderful.
believe, Kat, if if government looked at this book and did everything we said, we would be out of the woods and on our way to a perfect future.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now we
Yeah.
have to convince the politicians that being doom and gloom doesn't help them.
No, I know it's hard.
There's so many things. So maybe for your next one, giving, no, I'm just kidding, getting the politicians on board. I mean, but that is the hard thing about all of
Yeah,
this, right? Is the way that we interact in society, people's different
yeah,
jobs, once you connect money to certain things, but it's wonderful to put this together and to find solutions, and then to be like, you're talking things out, and
yeah,
other people, other writers are talking things out, specifically with this disarming fiction story. Like, let's look at this and see, people
yeah.
see it as a good idea, and then maybe it'll take off, and how
I'm
wonderful
hoping
would
so.
that be?
I'm hoping so. Yeah.
That is wonderful. I mean, I think that you're a great example of how, if somebody has any sort of passion, that there are solutions to using your writing
Yeah.
towards that passion. Um,
And that's where the art is, because to be honest, it's hard enough. I mean, we both know, just to write a decent story that engages people with good characters and good pace and good plot. It's hard enough to do that when you're just trying to tell a story.
yeah,
But when you're trying to get over an idea at the same time, it's extra hard. And it's so easy to do it badly. So I know, because I have to read a lot of the entries, and it is easy to do it badly. So one of the things we also do is do some sort of storytelling workshops and things like that
Okay.
on writing for a cause, and to try and give people a chance to sort of brainstorm in a friendly space and get
Right.
feedback and so on. Because yeah, it's easy to do it badly, and my first steps, I did it badly, and my first drafts are always appalling.
Well, yes,
I
same
write it
here.
out my system, and then I just really edit harshly and think,
Yes.
is this actually interesting for the reader to read in its own right? And if it's not, it comes out.
Well, that's a good question to ask all the time.
Yeah.
So are your writers usually climate scientists and
No,
professors,
no.
or are they just a mix? Some writers, some
So, like I said, for this one, for the anthology, I'd say maybe a third of the writers were climate, well, not exact experts, but maybe an expert in a particular field. And
okay.
they were the ones that worked very much with the kind of the actual writers, the experienced
Right.
writers and the literary consultants and so on, to really boost up the story elements.
Okay.
Um, so for example, one of them, he knew everything about everything, but he put it all on the page, and it was really hard then. We had to do a lot of work to get it to good. And in the end, there's some stories which are written by three of us. And we actually wrote really well together because we all brought something completely different to it.
Oh, that's fun.
And that was the only way we could do that for a few of the stories. So everyone's skills were involved. Some of the writers are just beautiful writers. I mean, there's a
Mm.
couple that are pure poetry, and one of them also happened to know quite a bit climate, which was great, and
Yeah.
another one didn't. And we had to then go in and say, well, can you do this? Oh, it breaks the flow. And it's like, well, just do it without breaking the flow. Then we can include it because it's such a great story.
But what a great way to challenge a writer.
Yeah,
Whoever, whatever your expertise is,
yeah,
you're being challenged to write if your expertise is more in the
yeah,
sciences, and you're being challenged to incorporate sciences if your
yeah,
expertise is writing. And we should all be challenged, right? In
yeah.
each of our areas.
That's right. That's right.
So this anthology is already out.
It is. We had a bit of trouble actually on Amazon. It's notionally published 2nd of November, in time for COP27. But then Amazon blocked it because we had stories that had been published in other places which writers had donated to us. We had a couple of stories like that. And even though I sent them, signed contracts and, confirmation we had permission, it still took them 3 weeks to unblock it. And so we wanted to capture, all the interest around the COP27 talks in Egypt, and we missed all that. Although I did
Oh
actually manage to
no.
attend virtually and do some sessions there.
Right.
So we're a
How
little
did
bit behind.
Amazon know that? How would they
But
know?
it triggers, if you got copyrighted content in there, they obviously put it through some software and it flagged up as having been published elsewhere.
Oh,
And
jeez.
that's good. I mean, good that they're doing that. But it wasn't good because we didn't get an email back saying this is what you've done. We got a cut and paste from their guidelines. There was 10
Right.
different reasons it might have, you know,
Oh,
been
yes.
blocked. And then we had to do this detective work, and we never really got a proper reply. It was just almost like a robot replying with a cut and paste from some different guidelines. So, it was
That's interesting.
intensely frustrating because all the authors had worked so hard, and I was
Right.
beginning to think, I can't believe this. We've worked so hard. Will this never be published?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's why my hair's grey. It was basically beautiful, beautiful brown a month ago.
Amazon's fault. Well, that's
Yeah,
interesting because Amazon has a problem with people stealing authors' work and
yeah,
re-uploading it and selling it. So something's not working properly for it to flag yours and to not flag
yeah.
other
I mean,
things.
no,
But
it's good they flagged it. It just would be nice if they wouldn't spend 3 weeks.
if it was one person who could say, "Oh, okay, I
Yeah,
see the contracts," that people,
yeah.
this is, somebody needs to write a story of like machines can't rule the world because they're not.
Oh, I know. It's frustrating.
It's so frustrating. Well, we will have the links in the show notes. It's called No More Fairy Tales. What's the subtitle?
Stories to save our planet.
Stories to Save Our Planet. That's a lovely title.
Yeah, we've got 24 stories there. Very eclectic. So there will be something for everyone.
And it's on Amazon, or is it wide?
It is on Amazon, and it's also direct via the Green Stories website and the habitatpress.com website. You can buy direct.
All right. Well, we will
I mean,
have.
I had to provide a direct route in the end while Amazon was blocking us. And so,
That's
out
so
of every
true.
problem comes an opportunity. Actually, this was an opportunity for
There you
us
go.
for me to pull my finger out and start, doing a direct version.
Just more work. I'm sure that you can handle that. More work as
Yeah.
do your speeches and teach your classes and write your own stories. Set up a shop. It's fine, Denise. No big deal. Well, we'll have the links to everything. I guess Amazon might be easier if they're outside of the UK. Is it buying direct?
Yeah, so the ebooks are pretty easy via Amazon or
Sure.
via the websites direct. But if you're paperback, yeah, it'd be much quicker if you order via Amazon. But
Okay.
you can also order via the website. It would just you have to allow a bit more time.
Wonderful. And if people have a manuscript that they think might fit your Orna Ross Green Stories novel competition, it's ends on the 3rd. Like that's the day that they have to
That's
get
right.
there first.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is greenstories.org.uk.
Yep.
All right. Well, we will have the links in the show notes. Um, remember, everyone, it has to have a climate solution,
Yay.
not just the world blowing up.
And if you want to know what that looks like, get the anthology
There you go. Make sure that your story,
or
and then you
Habitat
have,
Man.
yeah, or Habitat Man.
Yep.
And they have until, they have through Christmas
Yeah.
to sort of amp up their book and make it
Yeah.
green solution. So, but I'm sure that there's quite a few. I can already think of a couple of writers that I know that
Yeah.
that's sort of their passion project to add it into
Excellent.
their fiction. Um, so we will get hopefully lots. It make your job more difficult. There you go. But you'll get to read some great stories, so that's always
No, I
fun,
really
right?
love that. Yeah, that's the best bit. I've managed to get it so I just read the top 10 now.
There you go. Wonderful. So thank you so much, Denise, for coming on again and telling us. And I'll have all these links in the show notes for people to go find you.
Okay, lovely to talk to you, Kat.